Every church that is struggling today was once full of people who believed they had found something real. The buildings were packed, the giving was generous, the pastor was trusted. And then something happened. Not overnight, not dramatically, but gradually. That exposed what was always underneath the surface. The question most Christians never ask is not what went wrong in these churches. The question is what was wrong all along that nobody was willing to see until it became impossible to ignore. Because the warning signs were always there. They were just inconvenient to acknowledge. Before we get into it, Bible in Action is going through some important changes right now. To make sure you never miss what we are producing, subscribe to our new channel, New Bible in Action. The link is in the description. Now let's talk about 5 churches that almost lost everything, and what their stories reveal about the state of Christianity today. Gateway Church in Southlake, Texas, was one of the most powerful evangelical churches in America. Founded by Robert Morris, a spiritual advisor to President Trump, a best-selling author on tithing and blessing, and the leader of a congregation of 25,000, it was the kind of church that Christians pointed to as evidence of what God could build through one man's faithfulness. When a woman named Cindy Clemishire came forward in June 2024, claiming Morris had sexually abused her, beginning when she was 12 years old, the institutional response was not transparency. It was self-protection. Elders who had known about abuse allegations for years said nothing. The pastor's son, positioned to inherit leadership, was quietly removed. A class action lawsuit alleged millions in donations had been misappropriated. In October 2025, Robert Morris pleaded guilty to 5 felony counts of lewd or indecent acts with a child. He served 6 months in jail, was released in March 2026, and is now required to register as a lifetime sex offender. The Book of Numbers, chapter 32, verse 23, states it with devastating simplicity. Be sure your sin will find you out. Robert Morris built a ministry on the premise that God blesses the faithful and exposes the unfaithful. And that premise turned out to be true in ways he never anticipated. The congregation that gave generously, trusted completely, and defended him publicly was left to process the reality that the man who taught them about God's blessing had spent decades hiding his own crimes behind institutional protection. Gateway Church is still standing, but what it lost cannot be recovered with a new pastor or a new building fund. What it lost was the trust that took a generation to build, and that is the most expensive thing any church can lose. And the second church on this list reveals that the pattern of institutional silence in the face of known abuse is not limited to one congregation or one leader. New Life Church in Colorado Springs, Colorado had already survived one of the most dramatic leadership collapses in American evangelical history. In 2006, founding pastor Ted Haggard resigned after admitting to drug use and sexual misconduct with a male escort. A scandal that shocked a nation and left a congregation of thousands to rebuild from almost nothing. The church spent years recovering. New leadership was established. And then in 2025, New Life found itself entangled in the Gateway Church scandal when it emerged that Pastor Brady Boyd and other church leaders had known about Robert Morris's abuse allegations for decades without ever reporting them to authorities or warning the people Morris continued to lead. Boyd resigned. 2 additional pastors were removed. A church that had already paid an enormous price for one leader's failure found itself implicated in another, not for what it had done, but for what it had chosen not to do. The book of Ezekiel, that's chapter 33, verse 8, states that if a watchman sees danger coming and does not sound the alarm, the blood of those who are harmed is on the watchman's hands. New Life Church did not create the abuse that Robert Morris committed. But the leaders who knew and stayed silent made a choice, and that choice had consequences for every person Morris harmed during the years that silence lasted. There is a theology of complicity that the church rarely preaches. The idea that knowledge of evil combined with silence about evil is not neutrality, but participation. New Life Church is still standing, but it is standing with the weight of a question it has never fully answered. What does a church owe to the victims of a man its leaders knew was dangerous? And the third church reveals that these patterns extend far beyond the borders of American Christianity. Before we go further, if this content is valuable to you and you want to keep receiving it, subscribe to New Bible in Action right now. The link is in the description. We are not going anywhere. We are just getting started somewhere new. Lagoinha Church in Brazil is one of the most influential evangelical churches in Latin America, known globally for its worship music, its network of affiliated congregations, and its reach across multiple countries. The church has produced worship songs sung in evangelical churches worldwide and built a brand that extends far beyond its home country. In 2024, a new affiliated campus called Lagoinha Belvedere was inaugurated, a former car dealership converted into an auditorium with 2,000 seats. Senior pastor André Valadão preached at the inauguration and publicly praised Daniel Vaccaro, the campus founder and one of Brazil's wealthiest bankers, as a lifelong friend of 20 years. 1 year later, Vaccaro was arrested in November 2025 as part of Brazil's largest banking fraud investigation. 4 months after his first arrest, authorities rearrested him and sent him to prison in Brasilia after a judge cited strong evidence that he had attempted to bribe a former central bank director. Police discovered messages in which Vaccaro and associates discussed plans to physically assault journalists who were investigating the case. The book of 2 Corinthians chapter 6 verse 14 asks what fellowship light can have with darkness. The connections between ministry and money, between pastoral credibility and political power, are not incidental. They are theological. A church that celebrates its associations with the powerful without examining the integrity of those associations has confused influence with faithfulness. Lagoinha did not create the banking fraud, but the intimacy between its senior leadership and a man now imprisoned for financial crimes and obstruction of justice raises a question that worship music cannot answer. Who exactly were we in business with, and what did we know? Lagoinha Church is still standing, but it is standing in the shadow of a question about institutional discernment that its leadership has yet to address publicly. And the fourth church on this list shows that abuse cover-ups are not always discovered quickly. Sometimes they take decades to surface. Harvest Christian Fellowship in Riverside, California, is led by Greg Laurie, one of the most recognizable names in American evangelism. Harvest crusades have filled stadiums for decades. Laurie's name is synonymous with gospel outreach on a massive scale. But beginning in September 2025, a series of lawsuits began to accumulate against Harvest and Laurie personally, alleging that a former missionary and pastor named Paul Havsgaard had sexually abused children at an orphanage in Romania for years, and that church leadership had known about the allegations for decades before reporting them to authorities. By early 2026, 23 lawsuits had been filed. Additional reporting revealed that 2 senior pastors had quietly disappeared from the church in 2021 and 2022. Their bios removed, their videos deleted. Their names never mentioned to the congregation of 15,000. One had reportedly been paid $4 million to sign a non-disclosure agreement. Former staff described being told not to ask questions. One said it felt like those pastors had never existed. The book of Proverbs, chapter 28, verse 13, states that whoever conceals transgressions will not prosper, but whoever confesses and forsakes them will obtain mercy. Harvest's initial response to the lawsuits was to call them financial extortion and defend the institution. The accumulation of 23 cases, the documented pattern of quiet departures and non-disclosure agreements, and the decades of silence before anyone called authorities tells a story that institutional statements cannot adequately address. Harvest Christian Fellowship is still standing, but it is standing under the weight of 23 lawsuits, a congregation that was never told why its senior pastors disappeared, and a question that grows louder with every new filing: how long did the institution know, and how many people paid the price for its silence? And the fifth and final church on this list reveals that these patterns are not limited to famous names and large platforms. Faith Life Church in New Albany, Ohio, is not a church most Christians outside of Ohio would recognize. But in April 2025, it became a case study in what happens when a smaller megachurch faces the same institutional pressures that have destroyed larger ones. The church came under scrutiny for a sexual abuse scandal that raised serious questions not only about what had occurred, but about how the institution had responded, including the use of employee non-disclosure agreements that critics argued were designed to silence people rather than pursue justice. The combination of the abuse allegations and the financial questions that emerged alongside them painted a picture that has become familiar across American Christianity. an institution that had developed a culture of self-protection, where the priority was managing the narrative rather than serving the truth. The book of 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 17 states that judgment begins with the household of God. Faith life. Church is not Gateway. It is not Harvest. It does not have a famous pastor or a global platform. But it demonstrates something important, that the patterns that destroy large churches do not require large churches to operate. They require only the same combination of unchecked leadership, institutional self-interest, and a culture where asking questions is treated as disloyalty. Faith Life Church is still standing. Whether it is standing on a foundation that can hold is a question only transparency and accountability can answer. These 5 churches are not cautionary tales about exceptional wickedness. They are case studies in what happens when institutions prioritize their own survival over the truth they were built to proclaim. Every one of them was once full of people who genuinely believed in what they were building, and every one of them reveals the same pattern, that the gap between what a church says it believes and what it actually does when the cost is high is the most honest measure of its spiritual health. If this video challenged something you needed to hear, subscribe to New Bible in Action right now. The link is in the description. Like this video, turn on notifications, and share it with someone who needs to hear this truth. We are not stopping. We are not going away. We are just getting started. Leave a comment below telling us what country you are watching from, and which of these 5 churches surprised you the most. May God give you the discernment to recognize when an institution has stopped serving the truth, and the courage to act on what you see.